The diplomatic station hung in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports every day. But today was different. Today, something special was happening that had never happened before in the 10,000 years of galactic history. Captain HFY walked quickly down the main corridor. His blue skin was darker than usual, which meant he was nervous. As head of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, he had seen many important events, but nothing like this. The message had come 3 days ago from the Krithaxian homeworld. It was written in the old ceremonial language that only the highest priests could read. The translation made HFY's hands shake when he first read it. The High Chieftain Vorthakun the Unconquerable offers the sacred death nectar to the human species. This honor has never been given to any alien race. The ceremony will take place in 7 days. HFY had immediately called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 30 different species gathered in the main conference room. The news spread like wildfire through the station. The Krithaxian death nectar was legendary across the galaxy. Every child knew the stories. It was a drink so powerful that it could kill most living things with just a few drops. Even the mighty Krithaxians, who were 12 feet tall and built like living tanks, could only drink tiny amounts during their most important ceremonies. The stories said that long ago, a Zentaron warrior had tried to steal some of the death nectar. He managed to drink just 1 drop before the Krithaxian guards caught him. The warrior fell into a coma that lasted for 6 months. When he woke up, he could only speak in ancient poetry and spent the rest of his life painting pictures of flowers. Another story told of a trading ship that accidentally spilled some death nectar into their water supply. The entire crew was found floating in their ship 3 days later. They were not dead, but they were all laughing uncontrollably and could not stop. It took a medical team 2 weeks to bring them back to normal. But the most famous story was about the crystalline Vorthak, who thought they were tough enough to handle the drink. The Vorthak were made of living crystal and considered themselves nearly indestructible. Their ambassador demanded to try the death nectar during a peace treaty signing. The Krithaxians warned him many times, but he would not listen. 1 sip of the death nectar turned the crystal ambassador into a pile of sparkling dust. The dust then started to sing opera for 3 hours, before finally going quiet. The Vorthak never spoke to the Krithaxians again. Now, somehow, the humans were being offered this impossible drink. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her laboratory, staring at the small vial of red liquid on her desk. The Krithaxians had sent a tiny sample for testing. Even this small amount, no bigger than a coin, was sealed in a container made from the strongest materials known to science. Sarah was the chief cultural attaché for humanity on the station. She was also a biochemist, which made her the obvious choice to analyze the death nectar. What she found in her tests made no sense. The computer showed readings that seemed impossible. The drink contained compounds that should not exist in the same liquid. Some parts of it were so acidic they could eat through metal. Other parts were so basic they could dissolve organic matter in seconds. Yet somehow, they all worked together in perfect balance. The energy readings were even more confusing. The liquid seemed to generate its own power, like a tiny nuclear reactor, but instead of radiation, it gave off waves of something the computer could only describe as pure aggression essence. Sarah's assistant, Dr. Martinez, looked at the readings and shook his head. "This stuff should be impossible," he said. "It's like someone took lightning, mixed it with fire, and then added the concentrated anger of 1,000 warriors." "The Krithaxians drink this?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Only their greatest warriors, and only during the most important ceremonies. And even then, they only take tiny sips. A full glass would probably kill one of them." Sarah thought about this. She had read everything she could find about human biology compared to other species. Humans were strange in many ways. They could eat things that poisoned most aliens. They could survive in environments that killed others. They healed faster and adapted quicker than almost any other known species. But this was different. This was not just about being tough or adaptable. This was about drinking something that was essentially liquid death. The door to her lab opened, and Captain HFY walked in. His blue skin was almost purple now, which meant he was very worried. "Dr. Chen," he said, I need to ask you something important. Are you sure you want to do this? No one would think less of humanity if you decided this was too dangerous. Sarah looked at the vial again. Inside the container, the red liquid seemed to move on its own, swirling in patterns that made her eyes water if she looked too long. Captain, she said, I've been thinking about this for 3 days. I've run every test I can think of. This drink should kill me just from touching it. But, she paused and turned to face him. But I've also been reading about human history. We've been drinking things that probably should have killed us for thousands of years. Alcohol that would poison most species. Spices that burn like fire. Coffee that would be classified as a drug on most worlds. Zexhai nodded slowly. He had heard about human coffee. There were warnings posted in every port about it. Maybe, Sarah continued, maybe this is just another thing that seems impossible until humans try it. The captain looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Very well, Dr. Chen. But I'm having the best medical team in the galaxy standing by. If this goes wrong, I want every possible chance to save your life. Sarah smiled. Thank you, Captain. But I have a feeling it's going to be fine. She looked at the vial one more time. In 2 days, she would drink the galaxy's most feared beverage in front of representatives from dozens of worlds. She would either make history or become a very interesting medical case. Either way, it was going to be memorable. The great hall of the diplomatic station had been transformed. Usually, it was a simple meeting room with plain white walls and basic furniture. But today, it looked like something from an ancient temple. Massive banners hung from the ceiling, each one showing the symbols of the Crythaxian Empire. The floor was covered with intricate patterns made from rare metals that glowed softly in the dim light. At the center of the room stood an altar carved from a single block of black stone that seemed to absorb all the light around it. Representatives from 47 different species filled the viewing area. Some sat in chairs designed for their particular body types. Others floated in special tanks filled with the gases they needed to breathe. A few hung from the ceiling on metal perches, their wings folded respectfully. Everyone was silent. This was not the usual chattering crowd that gathered for normal diplomatic events. This was something sacred, something that had never happened before in the recorded history of the galaxy. Ambassador Trelmick of the Centaurian Federation adjusted his formal robes nervously. He had traveled for 2 weeks to be here, crossing half the galaxy to witness this moment. His aide, a young Centaurian named Veltar, stood beside him with a recording device. Are you sure this is safe? Veltar whispered. What if the human dies? Won't that cause a diplomatic crisis? Trelmick shook his head slowly. If the human dies, it will prove that even they have limits. If she lives... He paused, not wanting to finish that thought. Near the front of the viewing area, Dr. Kresh of the Vorthak Science Council made notes on his crystal tablet. The Vorthak had particular interest in this ceremony. They still remembered what happened to their ambassador 300 years ago. The pile of singing dust had become something of a legend among their people. Fascinating, Dr. Kresh muttered to his assistant. If the human can actually consume the death nectar without dying, we will need to completely revise our understanding of carbon-based biology. At the back of the hall, a group of Zentaron military officers watched with professional interest. General Kaksoon crossed his forearms and studied the human who would attempt this impossible feat. Look at her, he said to his lieutenant. She seems calm. Either she doesn't understand what she's about to do, or humans are even more dangerous than we thought. The sound of deep drums filled the air. The ceremony was about to begin. A door at the far end of the hall opened, and the Crythaxian delegation entered. First came the priests, wearing robes that seemed to be made of pure shadow. They moved in perfect formation, their footsteps silent despite their massive size. Behind them walked the honor guard, 12 Crythaxian warriors chosen for their strength and courage. Each one was over 10 feet tall, with scales that looked like natural armor. They carried ceremonial weapons that hummed with energy. Finally, the High Chieftain himself appeared. Vorthak Hun the Unconquerable was a sight that made even the bravest beings take a step backward. He stood 12.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they could crush steel. His scales were deep red, almost black, and his eyes glowed like yellow fires. But what made him truly impressive was the way he moved. Despite his size, he walked with the grace of a dancer and the confidence of someone who had never been defeated in battle. Scars covered his body, each one telling the story of a victory won against impossible odds. The delegation reached the altar, and the drums stopped. The silence that followed was so complete that people could hear their own heartbeats. Dr. Sarah Chen entered from a side door. She wore a simple white dress, as requested by the Krithaxian priests. Compared to the massive aliens around her, she looked tiny and fragile, but she walked with steady steps and kept her head high. The high priest, an ancient Krithaxian whose scales had turned silver with age, began to chant in the old language. His voice was deep and powerful, filling the entire hall with words that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. The universal translators worked frantically to render the meaning. Behold, the sacred death nectar, born from the fruit of the eternal war tree, blessed by the tears of conquered enemies, and aged in the heart of dying stars. This is the drink of ultimate warriors, the test of true strength, the liquid fire that separates the worthy from the weak. As he chanted, other priests began to prepare the drink. They moved with careful, practiced motions, each step of the ritual performed exactly as it had been for thousands of years. First, they brought out a container that looked like it was made of crystallized starlight. Inside was the death nectar itself, a liquid so red it seemed to glow with its own inner fire. Even through the protective container, some of the aliens in the viewing area could feel its power. Next came the goblet. It was forged from metals taken from the core of a collapsed star and shaped by the greatest artisans of the Krithaxian Empire. The goblet itself was said to be worth more than most planets, but its true value was in what it represented, the honor of drinking from it. The high priest continued his chant while carefully measuring the death nectar into the goblet. Each drop that fell made a sound like a tiny bell ringing. The liquid seemed to move on its own, swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Witness now the offering of ultimate respect, the translator rendered. Never before has this gift been given to those not born of Krithaxian blood. This human stands before the test that has broken the minds of the strongest warriors and dissolved the bodies of the greatest heroes. Dr. Chen stepped forward as the priest gestured for her to approach. She could feel the eyes of hundreds of beings watching her every move. Some were curious, some were afraid, and some were simply waiting to see what would happen when a human tried to drink liquid death. Vorthakun himself lifted the goblet with both clawed hands. His yellow eyes met Sarah's brown ones, and for a moment, something passed between them. A recognition of courage, perhaps, or simply an understanding that they were both about to witness something that would be remembered for centuries. Human Dr. Sarah Chen, Vorthakun said, his voice like thunder rolling across mountains. I offer you the sacred death nectar, the greatest honor my people can bestow. Drink, if you dare, and know that whatever happens, you will be remembered as one who faced the ultimate test. Sarah reached out and took the goblet from his massive hands. It was surprisingly light, despite being made from star core metals. The death nectar inside seemed to pulse like a living heartbeat. Around the hall, beings held their breath. Medical teams stood ready. Recording devices captured every moment. And at the center of it all, a human woman looked down at a drink that could kill her and smiled. Dr. Sarah Chen held the goblet in both hands and looked down at the swirling red liquid inside. Up close, she could see that it really did seem to glow with its own light. Small sparks of energy danced on the surface like tiny lightning bolts. The smell was strange, like cinnamon mixed with ozone, and something that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. Around the Great Hall, hundreds of aliens watched in complete silence. Some had traveled across the galaxy just to see this moment. Others had lived their entire lives hearing stories about the legendary death nectar, never imagining they would see someone actually attempt to drink it. Ambassador Trelmick gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Beside him, his aide Veltar had stopped breathing entirely and was turning a pale shade of blue. Dr. Kresh of the Vorthak had his crystal recording devices running at maximum power. This moment would either be the greatest scientific discovery of the century or the most spectacular death ever recorded. In the military section, General Kaksun and his officers leaned forward. They had seen many brave warriors face impossible odds, but this was different. This was not about skill or training or even courage. This was about biology. About whether a human body could survive something that had defeated every other species in the galaxy. At the altar, Vorthok Hun watched carefully. His yellow eyes never left the human woman. In his long life, he had seen many warriors attempt great feats. Some succeeded, some failed, but all of them showed fear before the attempt. This human showed only mild curiosity, as if she was trying to decide whether she wanted tea or coffee with breakfast. Sarah raised the goblet toward her lips. The liquid inside seemed to pulse faster, as if it knew what was about to happen. She paused for a moment. Not from fear, but because she was trying to identify the different smells. There was definitely something fruity in there, along with spices she couldn't quite recognize. She took a small sip. The taste was interesting. It started sweet, like berry juice. But then there was a warm sensation that spread across her tongue. It reminded her of the hot cider her mother used to make, but with more complexity. There were layers of flavor that seemed to change as she held the liquid in her mouth. Around the hall, aliens waited for her to collapse, or scream, or burst into flames, or dissolve into dust, or any of the 100 other things that happened when beings tried to drink death nectar. Instead, Sarah swallowed thoughtfully and took another sip. This time she drank a bit more, trying to identify all the different flavors. There was definitely cranberry in there, and something that tasted like pomegranate. The warm sensation was stronger now, spreading down her throat and into her stomach, but it was pleasant, like drinking hot soup on a cold day. Ambassador Trelmick made a small choking sound. His aide had turned completely blue and appeared to have fainted. Dr. Kresh's recording equipment was working so hard it had started to smoke. The readings it was getting made no sense at all. The human should be dead, or at least unconscious, or singing opera, something. Anything other than calmly drinking the most dangerous substance known to galactic science. Sarah took a larger drink this time, almost finishing half the goblet. The flavor was really quite good once you got used to it. The spiciness reminded her of ginger, and there was a hint of something like cardamom. It was complex and interesting, the kind of drink you might serve at a fancy dinner party. She looked up at Vorthok Hun, who was staring at her with his mouth hanging open, showing rows of teeth that could bite through steel. "This is really quite good," she said with a smile. "What did you say it was made from?" The high priest dropped his ceremonial staff. The clang when it hit the floor echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. You can speak?" Vorthok Hun asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I can speak. Why wouldn't I be able to speak?" Sarah looked genuinely puzzled. She took another drink, finishing most of what remained in the goblet. One of the Zentauron officers fell off his chair. Dr. Kresh had started making notes so fast his crystal stylus was glowing white-hot. In the back of the hall, someone was praying loudly in a language the translators couldn't identify. Sarah drained the last of the death nectar and set the goblet down on the altar. She smiled politely at the gathered aliens, who were all staring at her like she had just performed a miracle. "That was lovely, thank you," she said to Vorthok Hun. "It reminds me of a drink my grandmother used to make for special occasions. She called it her party punch. Although," she paused thoughtfully, "she used to add a bit more ginger to give it some kick. This is quite mild, actually." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then Vorthok Hun, the unconquerable warrior who had never been defeated in battle, who had faced down entire armies and never shown fear, asked in a small, confused voice, "Mild?" "Well, yes," Sarah said. "I mean, it's flavorful, don't get me wrong, but if you want something with real kick, you should try my grandmother's recipe. Or maybe some of our coffee. That stuff could wake the dead." She laughed at her own joke. From somewhere in the viewing area came the sound of someone hyperventilating. You call the sacred death nectar mild?" The high priest had recovered his voice. though it cracked slightly. Sarah tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. Death nectar? Is that what you call it? I would have called it fruit punch. Maybe berry juice. It's quite refreshing, actually. She looked hopefully at the empty goblet. I don't suppose you have any more? I'm still a bit thirsty. 3 different alien species medical monitors began beeping alarms. Ambassador Trelmick's aide woke up from his faint, took one look at Sarah standing there completely unharmed, and fainted again. Dr. Kresh was frantically updating his notes. Subject consumed entire serving of Class XI biohazard. No apparent ill effects. Requests additional serving. Recommends recipe modifications. What in the name of all that is holy are these creatures? Vorthak Hun stared at the human woman who had just drunk a full goblet of the most dangerous substance in the galaxy and asked for seconds. In his mind, everything he thought he knew about strength, power, and what it meant to be a warrior crumbled like ancient stone. Your grandmother makes something stronger than this? He asked weakly. Sarah brightened. Oh yes. Would you like the recipe? It's really quite simple. You start with cranberry juice and pomegranate juice. Then you add fresh ginger, a touch of cinnamon, and the secret ingredient. She paused dramatically. Hot sauce. From the viewing area came the unmistakable sound of someone being violently sick. Hot sauce? Vorthak Hun repeated, as if the words were in a language he didn't understand. Just a few drops, Sarah assured him. For kick. Although, now that I think about it, humans might have a higher tolerance for these things than other species. We've been drinking fermented fruit juice for thousands of years, and coffee, and alcohol, and eating things that are literally on fire. She looked around at all the staring faces and suddenly realized she might have said something wrong. Oh dear, she said softly. This was supposed to be a big honor, wasn't it? I'm sorry if I didn't react properly. Should I have pretended it was stronger than it was? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, strength, and the natural order of things. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within 6 hours of the ceremony, every major news network was running the same impossible story. A human had drunk the legendary Crithaxian death nectar and called it mild fruit juice. On the Centaurian homeworld, the High Council called an emergency session. The massive council chamber, built to hold representatives from across their federation, was packed beyond capacity. Holographic displays showed the footage from the diplomatic station over and over again. This changes everything, declared Council Leader Mordoon, his tentacles writhing with agitation. If humans can consume Class XII biological weapons as refreshments, what does that say about their military potential? The military advisor, General Teclon, stood to address the council. Our computers have run every analysis possible. The human showed no signs of distress. No physical reaction at all. She consumed enough death nectar to kill a small army and asked for more. In the Vorthak crystal cities, emergency meetings were being held in chambers that had not been used for centuries. The crystalline beings communicated through harmonic resonances, and the entire city rang with their worried discussions. Dr. Kresh had returned home immediately after the ceremony. His report to the Science Council was causing waves of shock through their society. They had always prided themselves on their scientific understanding, but humans made no sense. Look at these biological readings, Dr. Kresh resonated to his colleagues. Their digestive systems can process compounds that would be lethal to us. Their liver function is off the charts. And according to this human's casual comments, they regularly consume substances even more dangerous than death nectar. Elder scientist Vorthak, whose crystal structure had grown for over 1,000 years, pulsed with confusion. She mentioned something called coffee. Our databases show it contains compounds that would be classified as neurological assault agents by 17 different species. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen's colleagues were dealing with their own crisis. The human government had received over 200 urgent communications from alien governments requesting immediate biological data about human consumption habits. Dr. James Rodriguez, Sarah's research partner, stood in front of a room full of government officials, military leaders, and confused scientists. On the table in front of him was an ordinary coffee mug, a bottle of orange juice, and a small container of hot sauce. "Let me understand this correctly," said General Morrison, the head of Earth's Defense Council. "The aliens are afraid of our breakfast?" "Not just afraid, Doctor," Rodriguez replied. "Terrified. I've been getting messages from xenobiologists across the galaxy, asking if humans are some kind of living chemical weapon. They want to know how we can drink things that would kill most other species." Secretary of State Williams looked at the items on the table. "But these are just normal things. People drink coffee every day. That's exactly the problem," Rodriguez explained. "What's normal for us is impossible for them. I received a message from the Galactic Health Authority this morning. They want to classify Earth as a Class V hazardous environment based solely on the contents of our grocery stores." Back on the diplomatic station, Dr. Sarah Chen was discovering just how much trouble she had caused. Her small laboratory had been declared a temporary quarantine zone, while alien scientists tried to understand how she was still alive. Captain HFY visited her every few hours, his blue skin cycling through different shades as he processed the endless stream of messages from across the galaxy. "Dr. Chen," he said during his latest visit, "I need to ask you some questions that might seem strange." "Of course, Captain. What would you like to know?" "The High Council of Centauri wants to know if humans consider death nectar to be a weapon or a beverage." Sarah thought about this. "Well, it was served to me as a drink, so I'd say beverage. Although I suppose if you gave it to someone who couldn't handle spicy food, they might not enjoy it." HFY made a note. His skin turned a darker shade of blue. "The Vorthak Science Council is asking about something called energy drinks. They claim these contain compounds that register as military-grade stimulants on their sensors." "Oh, those." Sarah smiled. "Yes. They're quite popular with our college students and office workers. They help you stay awake when you need to work late." "Why do they ask?" "Because Dr. Kresch's preliminary scans of your belongings detected several containers of these substances. The Vorthak government is demanding to know why humans carry chemical weapons disguised as refreshments." Sarah laughed. "Chemical weapons? They're sold in every convenience store on Earth. Children drink them." HFY's skin went completely dark blue, which meant he was approaching panic. "Children? Well, teenagers mostly. Although some of the milder ones are fine for kids. We have special versions with less caffeine for younger people." The captain sat down heavily. "Dr. Chen, I need you to understand something. What you just described would be considered child endangerment by most galactic civilizations. The substances you call mild would require special permits to transport on most worlds." Sarah was beginning to realize the scope of the misunderstanding. "Captain, I think I need to make some calls to Earth. I'm starting to suspect that human biology might be more robust than we realized." Over the next few days, the situation became even more complicated. Dr. Rodriguez arrived from Earth with what he considered to be mild refreshments for his colleague. The care package he brought caused a diplomatic incident. The station's security sensors immediately classified his luggage as containing hazardous materials. When customs officials opened his bags, they found bottles of coffee, energy drinks, citrus juice, and a small bottle of habanero hot sauce that Sarah had requested. The hot sauce alone was classified as a Class V chemical weapon by 3 different species detection systems. "It's just hot sauce, Doctor," Rodriguez tried to explain to the emergency response team that had surrounded his luggage. "My grandmother makes it. It's not even that spicy by human standards." The team leader, a nervous Centaurian security officer, consulted his readings again. "Sir, this substance contains capsaicin levels that would be considered torture devices under galactic law. Are you saying humans voluntarily consume this for pleasure?" "Well, yes. We put it on food to make it taste better." The officer's tentacles went completely limp. You torture your food before eating it?" Meanwhile, Vorthak Hun the Unconquerable was having his own crisis. The mighty Krithaxian warrior had spent 3 sleepless days trying to understand what had happened in the ceremony. Everything he had believed about strength and power had been shaken to its core. His advisors found him in his private chambers, staring at a holographic display that showed Sarah drinking the death nectar over and over again. "My lord," said his chief counselor, war leader Krathun, "perhaps the human was using some kind of protective technology?" Vorthakun shook his massive head. "No. Our scanners detected nothing artificial. She drank it with her own body, processed it with her own biology, and she was not even impressed. Then perhaps she was hiding her pain, showing courage in the face of certain death? She asked for more, Krathun. She criticized the recipe. She offered to improve it." The High Chieftain's voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. "In 10,000 years of our history, no being has ever asked for a second serving of the death nectar." War leader Krathun was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that was on every Krithaxian's mind. "My lord, what does this mean for our people? For our reputation as the galaxy's ultimate warriors?" Vorthak Hun stood and walked to his window, which looked out over the red plains of his homeworld. In the distance, the eternal war trees swayed in the wind, their fruit glowing with the same dangerous energy that made the death nectar so feared. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it means we have found worthy allies. Or perhaps," he paused, a thought occurring to him, "perhaps it means we need to learn more about human beverages." The implications of that statement would echo across the galaxy for years to come. 6 months after what the galactic media had dubbed the Juice Incident, the universe looked very different. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her new office overlooking the main plaza of the diplomatic station and watched as alien tourists lined up outside Earth's first official, Extreme Beverage Experience Center. Her official title was now Human Beverage Safety Coordinator, a position that somehow made her one of the most influential beings in known space. The job mostly involved trying to convince alien species that normal human drinks were not actually weapons of mass destruction. The irony was not lost on her. A gentle chime announced a visitor. Sarah turned to see her assistant, a young Centaurian named Veltar, who had volunteered for the job after fainting during the original ceremony. He had since become something of an expert on human refreshments, though he still turned pale whenever someone mentioned coffee. "Dr. Chen," Veltar said, his tentacles carefully arranged in the formal pattern that meant important news. "The Galactic Trade Commission has approved Earth's application to export beverages to 14 more systems. However, they're requiring Class 7 hazmat containers for anything containing caffeine." Sarah sighed. "Even the decaffeinated coffee? Especially the decaffeinated coffee. They don't understand how humans can remove the dangerous compounds and still call it the same drink. The Vorthak Science Council thinks decaffeination might be a form of chemical warfare preparation." Through her window, Sarah could see a group of Centaurian tourists taking pictures of themselves next to a display case containing an ordinary can of cola. The drink was sealed behind reinforced glass with warning labels in 47 different languages. The transformation had started within days of the ceremony. What began as scientific curiosity quickly became a galactic phenomenon. Alien beings traveled from across known space just to observe humans consuming what they considered impossible substances. Earth's economy had accidentally stumbled into the most profitable export market in galactic history. Coffee shops required military-grade security clearances. Energy drink manufacturing had become a classified industry. And Sarah's grandmother's hot sauce recipe was now protected under the Galactic Dangerous Substances Treaty. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal a figure that still made most beings instinctively step backward. Vorthak Hun the Unconquerable had to duck to fit through the doorway, his massive frame barely fitting in the office designed for smaller species. But his fearsome appearance was somewhat undermined by the fact that he was carefully carrying a small paper cup with a plastic lid and straw. "Greetings, Juice Sister," he rumbled in his deep voice, using the title that had become popular among the Krithaxian people. "Hello, Vorthak Hun," Sarah replied with a genuine smile. "How did the meeting with the Agricultural Committee go?" The mighty warrior carefully set his drink on Sarah's desk and settled into the reinforced chair she kept for him. "They have approved our proposal. The Krithaxian Empire will begin cultivating earth crops within the year. We are particularly interested in..." He consulted a small device, cranberries, and pomegranates. That's wonderful. I'm sure your people will enjoy having fresh ingredients for new drink recipes. Vorthak Hun picked up his cup and took a careful sip through the straw. 6 months ago, the sight of the galaxy's most feared warrior drinking through a colorful plastic straw would have caused diplomatic incidents. Now, it was just Tuesday. The coffee remains challenging, he admitted. But I have been working with your grandmother's hot sauce recipe. My warriors are impressed. We may incorporate it into our training regimens. Sarah tried not to laugh at the image of giant Crithaxian warriors doing military exercises while drinking her grandmother's spicy punch. How are they handling it? 3 of my best soldiers were hospitalized last week. They are recovering well and have requested the recipe to share with their clans. Vorthak Hun's eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride. You humans have taught us much about what it truly means to be strong. Their friendship had been one of the more unexpected developments of the past months. The fearsome High Chieftain had become a regular visitor to the station, eager to learn about human beverages and share stories of Crithaxian culture. He had even started what he called a cultural exchange program, though most people knew it as Vorthak Hun's quest to drink everything humans consider normal. Speaking of which, Sarah said, I have something new for you to try. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small bottle. This is something called kombucha. It's fermented tea. Vorthak Hun's eyes lit up. Fermented? Like the death nectar? Sort of, but much milder. It's considered a health drink on Earth. The warrior examined the bottle with the intensity of a scientist studying a new element. Fascinating. The humans ferment beverages for health rather than strength trials. Your species continues to amaze me. A communication alert chimed from Sarah's desk. Veltar appeared on the screen, looking slightly stressed. Dr. Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation in the main plaza. A group of Vorthak tourists discovered the hot chocolate stand. Sarah and Vorthak Hun looked at each other and hurried to the window. Below, they could see a crowd of crystalline beings surrounding a small cart. The vendor, a cheerful human teenager named Marcus, was trying to explain that hot chocolate was safe for children. The Vorthak were frantically taking readings with their scanning equipment. One of them appeared to be arguing with Marcus about whether serving heated liquid stimulants to minors was legal under galactic law. I should go handle that, Sarah said with a sigh. I will come with you, Vorthak Hun offered. Perhaps my presence will reassure them. As they walked toward the plaza, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The diplomatic station had become a hub of cultural exchange. Though it was an exchange nobody had expected. Humans taught aliens about beverages, while aliens taught humans about the importance of warning labels and proper hazmat procedures. The Crithaxians had officially allied themselves with humanity, declaring them worthy of the Brotherhood of Ultimate Refreshment. The Centaurian Federation had established a joint research program to study human digestion. Even the Vorthak, despite their continued nervousness around human drinks, had opened formal diplomatic relations. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed strength itself. The old ideas about power and dominance had given way to a new understanding. True strength, many species were beginning to realize, wasn't about being able to defeat enemies in battle. It was about being able to drink your grandmother's fruit punch and ask for seconds. They reached the hot chocolate stand where Marcus was patiently explaining to a group of very nervous Vorthak tourists that marshmallows were not, in fact, explosive. It's really quite simple, he was saying. You just heat up milk and chocolate and add some sugar. Kids love it. One of the Vorthak resonated something that the translator rendered as, the human child speaks of heating dairy products combined with stimulants for the consumption of smaller humans. This cannot be safe. Vorthak Hun stepped forward, his presence immediately getting everyone's attention. Peace, crystal friends, he rumbled. I have consumed many human beverages. This one is indeed safe. Observe. Observe. He accepted a cup from Marcus and drank the entire thing without pausing. The Vorthak watched in fascination as the mighty warrior finished the drink and smiled. Delicious, Vorthak Hun declared. Mild and pleasant, perfect for small warriors in training. The Vorthak began resonating among themselves in harmonics too complex for the translators. Finally, their leader approached Marcus nervously. "Small human," the translator rendered. "We would like to purchase." "What is the appropriate quantity for beings of our size?" Marcus grinned. "Well, you're a lot bigger than our usual customers. Maybe I should make you the extra-large size?" As Sarah watched the nervous aliens tentatively sipping hot chocolate while a teenager explained the proper way to eat marshmallows, she couldn't help but smile. This wasn't what she had expected when she first accepted the assignment to the diplomatic station. Her communicator beeped with an incoming message. It was from Earth's Department of Agriculture. "Dr. Chen, urgent question from Galactic Trade Commission. They want to know if peppermint tea requires special handling permits. Please advise." Sarah looked at Vorthok Hun, who was carefully explaining to a group of fascinated Vorthok why humans put tiny white spheres of sweetness in their hot drinks. She thought about her grandmother's kitchen, full of spices and sauces and drinks that were now considered galactic treasures. Then she looked at her schedule for the next day. A meeting with the Zentorian Council about coffee regulations. A consultation with Crethaxian brewmasters about developing new fruit punch recipes, and a cultural presentation about the ancient human art of making lemonade. She typed back her response. "Peppermint tea should be fine, but maybe require a warning label that says, 'may cause refreshing sensation.'" As the sun set over the diplomatic station, casting long shadows across the plaza, Sarah Chen realized that she had accidentally become the bridge between two very different ideas of what it meant to be strong. On one side were species that measured strength by what you could survive. On the other were humans, who measured it by what you could enjoy, and somehow, in a universe full of impossible drinks and nervous aliens, that was exactly where she wanted to be.